Afternoon, and welcome to the digital live stream. We're here today at the Exchange Lab at 808 Douglas, and just want to acknowledge that we're joining you today from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nation, and just would suggest that you take a moment to reflect on the territory that you're joining us from. A few housekeeping items from me this morning. This session is being recorded and it will be shared with an internal and an external audience. You can turn on live captions if you like. You'll find the bottom for that, the button for that at the bottom right of your screen. And we'll be using Slido. So you can be able to interact with us, ask questions. You'll be able to upvote your colleagues' questions, so please do that. We're going to spend about 10 minutes at the end of the session answering all of your questions. Anything we don't get to, we will cover in next month's digital podcast. And there'll be a survey, as always, our usual survey at the end of the session. Please do fill it out. We do read it, we do use it, and it becomes fodder for our next session. So please make sure you fill that out. The Exchange Lab, which we're in today, was completed during the pandemic, and it's a beautiful space for collaboration, but there wasn't a whole lot of collaborating going on until this week with return to work. And so it's nice to be in the space and seeing more people using that space and collaborating, so that's really great. And I'd encourage anybody who's interested in seeing this space to come down to 808 Douglas and check it out. Chances are, if you come and check out the beautiful space we have here, you'll want to be a part of it. So please make sure you have some time and do that. Joining me today is my old friend, Ruman Carter. So Ruman is the executive lead for service transformation and all things digital at BC Parks. And many of you will know that there was a launch of their new Parks site and app. And some of you may have even used it. So Ruman's joining me to tell me all about his work at BC Parks and his vision for digital transformation in that area. We're going to get to the audience's questions, but I have a few of my own first. And the first is, what was compelling enough about BC Parks to draw you away from your work at the Exchange Lab? Because you were a familiar fixture in this lab for a long time. So I know it had to be something big.
Yeah, it was really hard to leave. If I can start off by saying it's such a privilege being here in the new space. The team has done such an incredible job building it out. What a treat. And you know, at transition time, we were intending the space to be built out, and then I moved on. But why did I move on? It was a number of things. You know, CJ, you said we're old friends. We're long-standing friends. Let's
we're old
focus
too,
on
man.
that. So you know that
long-standing and old.
I got into this work of digital, kind of the tyranny of small decisions, and almost by mistake. Mm-hmm. And my background originally is as a wildlife biologist and then as a lawyer. And so when the opportunity came to work in BC Parks, which is so close to my heart, my bio often starts that I grew up with a forest in my backyard in our shared hometown of Port Alberni. Mm-hmm. So to be able to work at that intersection of the things that matter deeply to me was a huge draw. But then also, CJ, you and I have worked on change initiatives a ton throughout our career, and we know that you need a compelling case for change. Yeah. And quite frankly, back in 2020, when we were at the lab, the phone rang with the camping reservation system going down, and could we help? Yeah. Ultimately, that camping reservation system, which is manages the province's largest accommodation provider, it was a burning platform. And so I thought it was a great opportunity for us to express and manifest this kind of change that we've been working on at the lab and otherwise in a program area.
Yeah, well, I knew it had to be something good. So 2 weeks ago, you guys launched the new camping reservation service. Mm-hmm. Things seem to have gone well with that. And I think together we've reached out and asked sort of our community what questions they might have had about that. And one of the burning questions was, how did you involve your executive, and what role did they play in terms of supporting that change, and how did you establish the executive?
I think the transformation, air quotes, that we've been working on, sure, it's about an app and software and whatnot, but more than that, it's about human beings. It's about our ways of working. And to your question around the executive, it's been about trust and agency. And so, I have had the opportunity to work a couple of times with, now Deputy Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, Kevin Jardine, had the chance to work with Minister Heyman previously. So part of that was preset, and I believe had their trust and support. But the executive was broader, and I have to give shine and shouts to my ADM Jim Standen and my executive peers as well. They really adopted these ways of working. They took it on. They were involved in concrete learning experiences, so the Digital Academy, which is tied to your office, of course, and they really also got embedded in the experiential learning. They showed up. We have this principle of digital governance of go and see, and so they kept showing up with a beginners and learners mindset. Also, you ask about executive, but more broadly in terms of leadership, which has really been distributed across this work at all levels, everybody showed up with a network mindset. And so really the effectiveness of this work, and hopefully it's substantiated that it has been successful, has been supported by the fact that we've enabled leaders at all levels, and they have moved away from a hierarchical model to a flatter model where everybody has an opportunity to show up, and that they've had the trust and support to do so, but also the courage to lean into that as well at all levels of the organization.
Would you say, based on your experiences, even in the lab previously, that having that executive support really helps in making that pivot?
Yeah, it's critical. And to be clear, and you and I have had the benefit of this, and back to trust, it's support manifested especially as trust and agency and ability, because the pivot that we express, typically this kind of work takes 9 to 12 months, and we did it in 3. Yeah. And so to be able to move at that kind of pace, you couldn't have the kind of committee-based governance that requires bi-weekly check-ins and approvals. You had to have that overarching, yes, you have trust, now show up and give me comfort as we go that we're on track.
So I know when we went out and asked the community questions, another question that came in was your approach to dealing with vendors and vendors in BC parks. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I remember years ago there was this group called the Service Delivery Working Group, and a peer who will remain nameless quite honestly and courageously said, I don't know how to work with vendors because I don't even have the vocabulary. When they show up and start talking in a particular way, I get sort of snowed and I don't understand what's going on. And that kind of relationship where we subordinate and we outsource, as came in as some of the operating model research, like our brains, that absolutely can't work. And so part of the approach was internal, was upskilling the team as well, and then really stepping into that role with vendors and asserting that we're going to share a space, that we're not outsourcing an accountability. We hold that accountability as parks, but the responsibility is going to be shared. I heard back from some of our vendors, though, that was a challenge for them as well. They, when we were making this pivot and had a third to a quarter of the time, they're like, there's no way we're going to be able to do this. Because working with government, their experience was, we're slow, right? Checking in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so really it was about, and with so many of these, the elements of this work, it's about aligning on a set of principles, aligning on a process, and aligning on a mindset. And then for us, it was, we'll go first and commit to and express that we can work at this pace.
So as the executive lead for service transformation, you're responsible for all things modernizing, digitizing, everything from conservation to parks.
I work horizontally across the entire parks agency, and now with recreation sites and trails coming into our division, we're in conversations about how we in fact might beget an end-to-end recreation service for the users of recreation sites, parks, and trails. Because CJ, this, and this prop wasn't here by design, but when we're out looking to camp, I know you're a glamper, or to recreate on trails and otherwise, we want to be able to go out and, with a location-enabled, device, find out what opportunities exist. We don't want that to be driven by the structure of government or whether it's a public or private campground or opportunity. We want to have that seamless experience. So that's the goal, is to work horizontally across our agency, our division, and hopefully across government and beyond to change, to seriously, literally, to step change, transform that experience. Camping
reservations was step one. That was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, and to step one, we had to, transformation, big word, former CIO of Canada, Alex Bonet, rejected the term. We're wrapping our arms around it, around a true step change, but the recognition that it has to be incremental. We can't just throw a highfalutin goal and then go after all of that. So we had to prove the case with camping reservations. We had something concrete, deliverable, executable, and then move on from there. So where to from here? And I have one of my teammates in the room. I didn't know she was going to be here, Nicole Del Rey, who leads our user experience research and design work. She's here collaborating with Ari around the use of tools, because we put out the word to the public that we're listening, and we want to have your input on what your priorities are, fixing, the incremental improvements in the reservation service and more broadly. So in terms of what's next, we're going to eat that dog food around user experience design, and have those priorities be directed, in equal part, by our provincial priorities and the needs of users as well.
So but anecdotally, knowing what you know about the sector, what would be your guess of what you're going to hear back?
We're going to hear back that there's a desire for that seamless experience, on the land base in respect of recreating, more broadly. We're absolutely going to hear that. I hear some emergent, conversation out of the new land, water, and resource stewardship around permitting. Permitting is a huge issue for government, has been for many, many years. We'd be happy to help out with that if called on. We have a park use permit system that we use right now, which is, call it a legacy system. More to the point though, CJ, and I touched on this earlier, the transformation is going to be about our people. It's going to be about our staff, it's going to be our park operator partners, and it's going to be about the public, and transforming the mindset that we have an opportunity. And in our materials we talk about parks as a platform, to all of us to orient around a mission of capturing the greatest public value in terms of health outcomes, recreation outcomes, conservation outcomes, reconciliation outcomes, with parks as that platform.
Okay. Those were my questions, but we have some questions coming in. So maybe we'll pivot a little bit to some of the audience questions. So the first one is, how is BC government ensuring that the different park operators are being held accountable and ensure that empty sites get filled when reservations don't show up?
It's a great question, and we were chatting beforehand about
this is a camper that didn't get their site.
Yeah, absolutely. So many things I could say there, because one of the things that's been fascinating about engaging the public is that you can't solve for demand with a reservation service, and so certainly there was some understandable consternation. I've been on the receiving end of not being able to get a site. We can't solve that with technology. That's more policy considerations. To the question around reservations and accountability, policy for BC Parks is very clear. A site needs to be occupied by 11 a.m. of the day following, and if not, the site is put into the first come first serve pool, and park operators are encouraged, they're mandated to fill that site as quickly as possible. One of the things that we're finding is that folks are reporting that they are seeing empty sites. Sometimes that's when they're checking in before that 11 o'clock, and so that's part of it. But the other part is that we recognize, and this is something that we're going to be focusing on from a policy perspective, because digital era transformation is not, again, just technology, it's our policies, is how can we ensure that if folks have made a reservation 2 months out and maybe forgotten about it, a priority has arisen, there's an incentive for them to release that camping, and then this is where technology comes in. We can notify folks as quickly as possible, challenged by things like connectivity, because a lot of these campgrounds are away from connected areas. We can get that into the internet so folks know and get a notification that it's available.
Okay. We have a question about the timeline. You said it had to be done in 3 months. It was the timeline was sped up. So somebody's asking, why did it have to be done in 3 months and not the more standard time frame?
Because if we hadn't done it in 3 months, we'd be sitting here talking about the prospect of camping this summer and not the reality, the ability to.
Tied to the camping season.
Tied to the camping season. And so, historically, camping has opened in different jurisdictions, sometimes first of the year, certainly by spring. And so the farthest we could push it back was March 21st to give us that time to sprint, quite literally, to get this done.
And we have a question about the type of product that you chose. Couldn't you have bought something off the shelf? There's lots of reservation apps or systems. They're plentiful. So why so much government effort?
One of the things that has been a key learning for me is the complexity of camping reservations in the BC context. Our policies are many. And they differ from many other jurisdictions. So that's been part of the complexity, and why we need folks like Nicole and otherwise to be involved. To be quite plain about it, Originally, when we did an options analysis dating back to summer of last year, our goal, well, the options analysis led to building a custom tool. We actually didn't go that way. So to your questioner, we actually have procured and deployed something off the shelf. But what we've been able to do is with this greater capacity around parks, this digital era leadership on the part of folks like Nicole, Jess Wade, our product owner, in respect of some of our tools, is we're able to move faster, to customize, to provide nuance, and and you and I talked about this beforehand. And to signal is to ask and answer questions about how can we bring BC's, for example, world-leading identity and access management tools to bear. We can only do that with our internal talent to work at the kind of pace that we intend to continue working at.
Okay. And we have a question about culture change. So any tips for culture change to create a shared accountability environment?
Okay, so generally speaking around culture, and former teammates of mine in the room have heard this before, is I make the case, and I'm not unique in this, that you don't change culture directly. You can't change culture directly. You can't assert that you're going to change culture. What you can change is experiences.
Yeah.
You can change, by shared experience, a mindset. And critically, and this is me, cribbing from Dave Snowden, the founder of the Cynefin method and framework, is that you can change process. So what we've been doing, which has, I think, though to be clear, I have no measure of culture, but I feel it, and I believe, looking at Nicole, that we feel that culture change. We've changed our ways of working. So we're using, Microsoft Teams. We're using the embedded, collaborative documents functionality and whatnot, which has also been a key element in the pace that we've been working at. But again, and finally, is in respect to something like our winter day use pass, which was deployed in 5 weeks. Longer story about how we could move that quickly in terms of common components and otherwise. Key in that, especially in a distributed workforce, was that we truly operated as a team of teams with Microsoft Teams as the hub for that, and weren't working in that sort of traditional legacy serial, email-based, again, incremental approvals-based fashion. So change process, show up as leaders, and culture will follow.
Yeah. We have a question about your user research. So what tools did you use to develop your UX research?
Yeah, so we're doing things like wireframing with Figma. We're using actually the GDX Orbian form solution for a form. We've also used the NRS-based common component of the Chef's forms tool. So those are some concrete tools. We're also just rolling out with an off-the-shelf tool that we piloted with GDX. Called Bang the Table for engagement, and so you were asking for how to get to feedback. You can find that at bcparks.ca/reserve, a link to that, and also that's a lot of different tools. We're also learning as we go, and so actually this wasn't planned, but to come full circle, when we put the word out seeking feedback, we had 2,000 people come back and sign up for our parks user experiencing testing squad. And that was, well, it's classic me, isn't it, Nicole? Is sort of create a problem and then figure out how to solve it. And so here's Nicole working with Ari on the use of Slido to query, can we use this, for example, some of the work that that James is doing around publications, et cetera. We're figuring it as we go. And so that's part of the disposition, is recognizing that in all of this, we've never had the answer fully baked. As we've moved, but back to Cynefin and those frameworks and complexity, you need to act, you need to sense, you need to respond and learn, and that's been the approach we've taken.
So we have somebody asking about the number of people you have working on user research and design to ensure that it's meeting user needs and not just business needs. What does your team look like?
Well, it looks like Nicole, as our staff team member. And then we have another amazing woman named Jane Mountain. She works with one of BC's leading design and delivery firms, OXD. And they work as a team of two, primarily. We have Harry Olson, who works as our visual designer, who informs that. But my favorite part, CJ, is that when Nicole and Jane are leading these research sessions, we hold an open invite. Hold an open invite to our executive, to other members of the Parks Agency. The quid pro quo is that we become note takers. when we're
Yeah.
there. And so we have leaders in Nicole and Jane, and we have broad engagement, and then the results of that engagement, the research comes in to a question, to a part that's kind of embedded in the question. That's getting shared openly. We're not filtering it. We are, and we're working on a process for sharing the results of these findings on the internet, and not least, and with approvals with partners like Parks Canada, who we're hearing actually don't have the support to do this kind of work. And so, camping is camping in many ways, and so we're looking to share those learnings with our partners as well.
Okay. Now this is a question from the audience, so don't think this is my question, because otherwise you'll think I'm crazy, because I asked you this before we were rolling, which is, you talked about identity and access.
Yeah.
So we have an audience member wondering about whether or not you looked into using the BC Services card and the BC card service to provide access to British Columbians, and what your decision making was around using it or not.
Well, and the shorter answer, of course, and we shared the humor in this, is that I was kind of responsible for this, this policy of using the services card, working with you, because, I'm very bullish on all the values of the utilization of the card. The plain fact is that, and I was working with Claire and the IDAM team on this. We just didn't have the time to roll it out, and because we're using an off-the-shelf tool, that tool wasn't sufficiently adaptable with necessary mapped APIs to deploy it. But we've made a commitment to the IDAM team, and through them to you, and our vendor partner is on notice that we will be rolling out a services card integration as soon as practicable. Obviously, things need to stabilize, experientially for users.
Yeah.
This will be another change, but we'll seek to make it clear why this change is beneficial in terms of security, seamlessness of experience, and things like the integration CJ of services. There's a social service fee exemption that's available for folks, and you probably know this from your past life, that can camp for free. If we can integrate by way of the services card for a user such that they sign on, and the camp reservation service knows that they qualify, and automatically, as it were, like they get that free access, that's the goal of this kind of work.
Or start bundling services, so the campers that have a reservation somewhere get preferential treatment, or reservations on the ferry, or I think there's lots of opportunities we could look at.
No shortage, to be sure.
Somebody's asking a question about the process you go through when determining to build or buy on sort of smallish applications.
Yeah. Well, that process that I described, one of the things a key thing that we used was a tool that I think many in your audience will know, which is Wardley mapping. It's something that we first experimented with, in the lab, and have deployed it as part of the practice in the lab before I left. And so we took that practice to Parks. We've been working as partners with the lab on this, and anybody who asks can ping me. The results of that mapping are available to you, and so mapped where, short version, elements were commodity that we could buy, elements were necessarily novel and customizable. And as it turns out, as I said, the result of that mapping suggested we move towards a hybrid of custom and commodity. Then we did the analysis of how long it would take to do that. It was 44 weeks. CJ, we had 22. So we had to pivot and move in this direction. And now incrementally, we'll be moving more towards what the results of that mapping process yielded by way of direction around best approach here.
So if somebody was interested, say, in the analysis or some of the templates and tools you had, they could contact you or somebody on your team?
Yeah, they absolutely can contact me, and then I think what I would seek to do is connect with Catherine Chernoff and others at the lab, so that the great values I've always seen at the lab as being as a hub, as a bridge, and also an information and acumen, builder and sharer. So rather than going just through me, let's make this work, readily accessible across government through your team at the lab.
And you have a question about code. Is the code base for the platform open source? And if so, how is it validated?
Yeah. The code base for the camping reservation system is not open source. However, the code base for the day use pass system that I described, as well as for our publication platform, are open source. Those are all findable at bcgov.github.io/bcparks. And they are validated through continuous open testing and checking.
Excellent. what operational results are your digital transformation efforts creating presently?
Parkies are incredibly impassioned, hardworking.
Did you say parkies?
Parkies. I learned that term when I came on. There's more work than time and capacity.
Yeah.
So operationally, what we're seeking to do, and again, like this isn't just about technology, is shifting our ways of working so that we can free up more time for people. One of my teammates who works in region, his name's Cody Ambrose. He spends an amount of time that pains me managing a spreadsheet around the myriad training requirements for rangers and other operational teams, WC requirements, firearms requirements, and otherwise. We don't have a central corporate tool for that management, and so he spends a whole lot of time, managing that spreadsheet. And so what we're doing is, Teams. We've updated that to a locally shared spreadsheet to something on Teams, which through controls, the updating can be distributed to various users. It's not a perfect solution, but it's incremental.
Right.
And we'll look to work, with partners across the government who have similar challenges on solving that for Cody, and then make more space for Cody to do more high-value work.
Okay. And we have a question about your resources. Were there new or reallocated resources that were applied to the camping reservation problem? And are these permanent, or are they there to support a broader vision? Or tell us a little bit about your resources.
I'm assuming that the person asking the question is talking about human resources, human beings, people, and in that it's been a blend. I've referenced Nicole a number of times, sorry. We worked together going back 6 years at the Environmental Assessment Office. I've gone recruiting and sought to bring folks like Nicole and Jessica Wade over to work with us on this this priority of ours. And so they show up with that acumen, built over years of the work, and then they work hand in glove with folks who've never done this type of work, but who are incredible human beings and professionals. And so through opportunities like digital leadership training and other collaborations with the lab, they've been rapidly upskilling. So it's a combination. And are they permanent? We are seeking to make all of our resources, the additional resources necessary to continuously improve through this work, permanent. And I said to you earlier, and reference our shared friend and colleague, JP Fournier, and the work that he's doing, on a next digital plan and in the digital investment office. We're still figuring out how to fund this work, in a continuing basis and making the case for the value. I hope that in this first year, we've made that case, and we'll continue looking to work with your office and others to make the case for the value and the investment of working in this way. Because, and to other versions of resources, I referenced it, when we build things and share them, we pay for them once.
That's right.
And then get outsized and compounding value going forward. So we'll keep showing up at parks as contributors in that fashion, and the hope is that by extension we can continue to get the support that we need to keep going as hard and fast as we have been.
So I think we might have time for one more if we have a quick answer,
okay.
But we'll see. So the question is, to what extent is a crisis like your legacy system breaking down the single best catalyst for a new way of working?
I CJ into the question, it doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah.
Never
waste a good crisis?
Never waste a good crisis. And it's part of the reason I went there is there was a clear imperative. There's something super concrete to work on, and that, by extension, you'd get the attraction, the support that was required. We shouldn't need it though. We shouldn't, let's minimize the number of healthcare.govs and, Phoenix pay systems and camping reservation systems, and let's make the case that all of this work, is high priority and that it deserves the kind of attention that, yes, a burning platform will attract.
I think we have a few more questions we probably didn't get to, but we can take care of those in our next podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining us here at the digital live stream. Please fill out the survey. It does help us sort of attenuate the next live stream in the podcast and the subjects that we choose. We want to make sure these are relevant and interesting to you, so please fill that out. And thanks to everybody who joined us here today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, CJ. Thanks all.
Thanks.